The Republicans in this chamber were against Governor Evers' budget before they ever read it. They were actually against this budget in November 2018 when he became governor. They define a Republican victory by a Tony Evers defeat. And that was clear meeting after meeting after meeting, issue by issue by issue in this budget. 22 days ago, I became a dad. And it was the most important, powerful, emotional experience of my entire life. So it's been 22 days since I've gotten a good night's sleep. A little bit of that has to do with the state budget, but mostly a newborn at home. And the experience of going through a pregnancy and a birth, and now the first couple weeks of life, have fundamentally and forever shifted and changed my view of healthcare, because for the first time in my very fortunate, relatively kind of young life, I relied in the most important moments on our healthcare system, and the workers, nurses, doctors in our clinics and in our hospitals to help my wife and I and have our dreams come true. And I was thinking when reading through these papers a little bit about that experience, and the image that came to mind, I just want to share a little bit or overshare a little bit. My wife and I, this is our first kid, and so we were over-prepared and kind of annoying to be around in the last couple of months because it's all we talked about, it's all we shopped for. And on the second floor of our house, we renovated a spare bedroom and turned it into a nursery. It's kind of like a light gray with white trim and a white crib and little clouds on the walls, little baby elephants everywhere because they don't make cute little baby donkeys for kids' rooms. So don't worry, Republicans, he will be raised a Democrat. I have no fear of that. We've got all of the gadgets and stuff in the room that you need, the cute little nightlight and the mobile and everything, if you can kind of follow along with me and what it looks like. And like many families, we have a glider rocking chair. And in the last weeks of the pregnancy, my wife would sit in the rocking chair, and she'd have both of her hands on her belly, and I would read. We have a bunch of different books, nerdy baby Star Wars books and various different Spanish lullabies, and I would read, and the sound of my voice, this is such a powerful moment, the sound of my voice, even though my son wasn't born yet, it would just send him wiggling and squiggling in my wife's belly, and she would have this smile on her face from ear to ear. And it was this incredible, amazing, romantic moment that we dreamed about. And in those moments, as she had her hands on her pregnant belly and I would read to our baby, soon to be, we had in our minds and in our conversations only the wildest hopes and dreams and aspirations for our son. We would plan which law school he would go to and which assembly district he would run for, and all the steps that come between birth and following our footsteps in our careers. And not once did we worry or we never had that fearful, difficult conversation that something would go wrong, that maybe we would lose him or that something would be difficult. And we would talk about our dreams and our hopes and our aspirations. And one of the reasons why we were able to focus just on those amazing and romantic visions is because we have incredible access to healthcare. Because if something happened, we knew who to call. If something happened, we knew where to go. If something happened, we could afford to have any interventions available at our fingertips. And, it wasn't without its bumps, and it wasn't totally carefree, and we did go in and we did need help and we did rely on the access we have. But as I read these papers, I was reflecting on these incredible romantic moments in my life, the lucky to have them. And I realize, and you all realize as you read these, not every parent in the state of Wisconsin is able to sit back in that glider with their hands on their belly thinking about only the hopes and the dreams that they have for their kids. Because if you're Black in the state of Wisconsin, mom's got an exponentially higher rate of dying either at childbirth or after she gives birth. That little Black baby has an exponentially higher rate of dying during childbirth or after childbirth. These racial disparities at our Native American population, our Latino population, they jump off the page as you read the Fiscal Bureau papers for the Department of Health Services. It is so sad that my neighbors of color do not get to sit in the rocking chair like I did and dream about the future. Instead, they sit in the rocking chair and worry just about the baby being born safely and on time and at weight and not having lifelong complications. Worried about the disparities, aware of the disparities. I sat and hoped and dreamed and prayed about all of those memories and running around with my kid, and my black and brown neighbors worried just about bringing that boy into the world, bringing their kid into the world. We debate about the role of government, where we should spend money, but some of the items in the governor's budget and DHS and the Democratic motion here today have the opportunity, the actual opportunity to save lives. We talk about government funding priorities and the benefit and the return on investment, but some of these programs actually save lives. They actually mean a difference in people's life, whether they live or die, or whether they have healthy, productive lives, or whether they are plagued by the disparities and long-term illnesses or preventable diseases. And the motion in front of us tackles this on a wide spectrum of issues, and with, directly head on, calling it out, investing directly in tackling racial disparities, not beating around the bush, but putting our money where our mouth is. We want to end this. We need to empower communities of color, black leaders, to the credible messengers in our community. We've got to put money into these organizations, and we've got to communicate, and we got to get into the streets, into the blocks, into the homes of our communities of color and change these disparities. We can no longer lead America in the racial disparities for moms and babies. And the motion today puts us on the track to change that. We have the power in this motion. If we have the political will, we certainly have the money to fund these programs to end or to reduce or mitigate these racial disparities. And beyond just the frontal assault of racial disparities, the motion also takes on other issues that are plaguing our state. You read these papers, you understand our state, it is not as healthy as we need to be. We are not headed in the right direction. Whether that's our aging population or issues with weight or tobacco use or alcohol or drugs, the list goes on and on. So the governor's budget, reflected in the Democratic motion, makes strategic investments in some smaller areas like tobacco and vaping cessation and prevention, spinal cord injury survivor research, deaf and hard of hearing, hearing aid supplements. These are smaller issues than the broader issues that likely take up the majority of our time, but they matter. They matter. They impact the life of our constituents. A lot of conversation and debate over the last hour or so about schools being virtual or closed or in person. And I want to begin by thanking the staff, the teachers, the administrators, parents, kids, everybody who lent a helping hand to get through an unprecedented challenge. I do not believe that schools closed. I believe they continued to provide education in the manner that the local leaders believed to be the safest 2 years. So I just want to make clear, I'm saying thank you if you were open the whole time, if you were virtual for half the time. If your kid still goes to virtual instruction, thank you to the faculty, the teachers, parents. We all tried our best, and we made the best decisions we had with the information, science, evidence that we had in front of us. It was hard. It was unprecedented. And thankfully, there's light at the end of the tunnel. And really, there are three legs on the stool of a successful education budget that we're debating. Those three legs of the stool, I would summarize the first and the most important as the amount of special education reimbursement that this body makes available. The second, investments in mental health services and the ability to provide adequate mental health services in our schools. And the third, meeting the changing demographics and populations within the diverse school districts of the state. So these are the three keys to a successful education budget. And special education is not a new topic to this committee. It was a key feature. It was front and center 2 years ago as we debated the state budget. And at that time, much of the commentary was focused on the Republicans' own Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding, which advocated moving the needle to 30% reimbursement. And the Republicans 2 years ago failed to hit that benchmark, that goalpost. We can fund special education at 45 and 50%, and we should. We should do it because the kids deserve it. The kids receiving special education, instruction, and services in our school are worth the investment. And the kids sitting next to them that go to school with them that may not receive special education services, they're worth it too. And this committee is fluent in how school districts have to move dollars from the general fund to the special education fund to account for the low reimbursement rate. So parents and advocates that maybe don't have a child with special needs still advocate for special education reimbursement increase because it directly impacts the general fund of every school district in the state of Wisconsin. You know, in the month of April, we went on our road show, and as you sit and you listen to the hundreds or thousands of people that come before us and testify, over and over and over again, you have school district administrators, big, small, in between, and they talk about special education and the transfer from the general fund to the special education appropriation. It might be $500,000 for a smaller district, or $1 million, or 20. It's real, and proportionately, it impacts districts across the state. Red, blue, rural, urban, suburban, everywhere in between. This is a fundamental challenge of education funding in the state of Wisconsin, and we need to rise to the challenge and fund special education at 45% and 50% as our motion does. The kids deserve this investment. The second leg of the stool is about mental health, and again, an issue that is no stranger to this committee. The motion in front of us, $46 million over the next 2 years in direct aids to school districts to expand services and treatment available in the halls of our schools. $7 million additional dollars in collaboration grants. Over $50 million. This is the benchmark of a successful investment to meet the mental health needs of our kids across the state. And the third leg of the stool is that our demographics are changing. Our population is changing. It doesn't matter if you're in a rural small district or an urban big district. The school hallways today look different than they did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And this motion in front of us in the governor's budget enhances categorical aids in several different ways to meet those needs. Whether that's an increase in English language learners, or poverty rates, or sparsity aid, or transportation costs. This is an encompassing motion that makes the investments necessary regardless of the unique needs of the school district. So, as is tradition, the Joint Committee on Finance traveled around the state to hear testimony and input from citizens in the four corners. We had 3 in-person hearings and 1 virtual. All of our offices were also inundated with calls, texts, emails, letters about budget priorities. Nearly 50% of the people that came before the Joint Committee on Finance were advocating for increased public education funding. Nearly half of the people of Wisconsin that took the time to raise their voice to Joint Finance were advocating for increased public education funding. And they were kids, they were parents of special needs students, they were also school district administrators and accountants that try to balance the books of school districts across the state. And what was the most important issue that they raised? Special education funding. Rural school district in northern Wisconsin, special education funding. My district in the city of Milwaukee, special education funding. And the Republicans have fallen short. They pledged to make 30% in the second year of this budget, but they've invested less raw dollars than they did in their previous budget 2 years ago. This last budget, the current budget we're under, failed to meet that benchmark of 30%, and the dollar amount that they have in this budget will again fail to meet that benchmark. And again, that's not the Governor Evers benchmark of 45% or 50% reimbursement for special ed. That's their own benchmark of 30% that the Blue Ribbon Commission on School Funding that Speaker Voss impaneled said is the benchmark for the state. And I want to spend my remaining 9 minutes and 12 seconds explaining why every single Republican on this committee should be advocating and supporting criminal justice reform in this budget. And that's because regardless of where you put yourself on the ideological spectrum of today's Republican Party, there is an argument, there is a way that criminal justice reform fits that ideology. So I've yelled a couple times so far on this budget, but I haven't really lived up to last budget's show and tell. Like I was doing a lot more stunts last time. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not really sleeping much anyway with a newborn at home. And I was thinking to myself at about 4 a.m. this morning when I was reading through the papers about DNR, I thought, Evan, you got to have a little bit more fun. The committee needs a little levity on DOC. So I had a little arts and crafts moment today. So here's a chart of the 12 Republicans of Joint Finance and why they should support criminal justice reform in the budget. Now, I have charted these Republican members from most moderate to most conservative. Sorry, Representatives Loudenbeck and Rodriguez, I got you over here. If you're wrong, we can talk. If I'm wrong, we can talk afterwards. We've got Zimmerman and Goyke, kind of moderates. Katzma and Kurtz in the middle. Senator Bernier right in the middle. Markline and Bourne, a little bit more conservative. Felskowski, you're a little bit more conservative. Senator Strobel, I didn't forget about you. I just gave you your own little section off the chart to the right. So look, if you're a moderate conservative and you are interested in equity and social justice, like I know some of the colleagues on this committee are, criminal justice reform checks that box. Our criminal justice system in Wisconsin is racially unequal. We incarcerate black people at among the highest rate compared to whites of any state in America. You want to end that? Vote for criminal justice reform. Criminal justice reform increases public safety. Say you live in an emerging suburban community in Milwaukee County and people call your office worried about crime. You want to reduce crime in Wisconsin? Invest in effective root cause programs that reduce recidivism. Invest in treatment, invest in alternatives to incarceration, and people won't reoffend and crime will go down. Now, say you are a person of deep faith that drives your politics. There are a number of national, evangelical, right-leaning faith groups that work on criminal justice reform. The idea of redemption and forgiveness is pretty central in the New Testament. Say you're just a populist guy. I got some national leaders at the bottom. So that the first is John Kasich and then Mitt Romney. Sorry, Shannon, that I put you next to Romney. I got Trump in the middle. I mentioned, Kanye and Kim Kardashian and Donald Trump. These items, criminal justice reform is popular. Go to the Badger Institute's website and look at recent polling that they conducted. A majority, I think, of Wisconsinites want to see us reduce spending in the Department of Corrections. They favor criminal justice reform. Now we're getting a little bit more conservative. Say that you want to just save tax dollars. Say you're a member of the CPA caucus and you have a really big calculator and you just want to reduce expenditures in the DOC. Well, then you should be supporting criminal justice reform. We spend too much on prisons in Wisconsin, and the way to do that is to reduce our population. Say you want to increase individual liberty. You're a libertarian living in Lincoln County and you don't like the government. Well, it turns out that the Department of Corrections is staffed entirely by government employees. And that's why I've got Rand Paul on the bottom of this chart. Libertarians across the country support criminal justice reform because it increases individual liberty. And last, Senator Strobel, if you just want to reduce the size of government, if you just want to bring down the size of government, you can do that with criminal justice reform by reducing the prison population in the state of Wisconsin. I mentioned earlier, Michigan, Texas, a whole smattering of other states have closed prisons. You want to shrink the footprint of government in Wisconsin? We have more facilities than we should. If we safely reformed our criminal justice system and reduced our prison population, we'd be able to close facilities. Some of them very old and very expensive, like Waupun Correctional and Green Bay Correctional. Some of them designed very poorly and built very poorly, like the Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility in downtown Milwaukee. We can close those facilities and free up tens of millions of dollars annually in general purpose revenue. And as I was mentioning earlier, we can reinvest that in programs that work to reduce recidivism, reduce crime. There are whole other little silos of the Republican Party that I could put on this chart. You want to keep families together. You want to keep two-parent households together. You want to not incarcerate moms and take them away from their kids. Then let's talk about criminal justice reform. You want to reduce the number of people with mental illness that are in prison. We can do better in our diversions and treatment alternatives for people with mental illness. Senator Baldwin, you've chaired the Children's Caucus for a long time in this building. If we want to talk about adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma and how we better deal with it than locking somebody up in prison, then join us in working towards criminal justice reform. There is a home for you in criminal justice reform, Wisconsin Republicans. Your colleagues around the country get it. And what has happened when they have advanced criminal justice reform and reduced the size of government and reduced Department of Corrections spending, you know what happened? They got reelected. It turns out that Republicans around the country in state legislatures that advanced criminal justice reform, they were not swept out of office in a wave election. So I'm looking for one Republican in this state to start talking out loud, put your name on a piece of paper, whether it's a motion in joint finance or a bill outside of the budget process. We have not nearly begun to scratch the surface of reforming our justice system. I know the co-chair just talked about a couple of programs here and a couple of programs there, but we have not begun to scratch the surface of what we need to do. And we're going nearly last. 45 states in this country, they have shown us a roadmap of what to do. Send fewer people to prison through lower admissions, stop revoking people for crimeless revocations. We had a gentleman come talk to us about that at the Hodag Dome. Senator Strobel, I watched you go talk to that man. I've met him. He was incarcerated for 18 months, I believe, because he had alcohol in his house. I mean, we spent 45, 50 grand incarcerating him. He lost his business because he had a bottle of liquor in his house. We had an opportunity to expand the earned release program in the governor's budget, stripped out of this budget. Under Governor Walker, Republicans expanded that program, but now all of a sudden, because Governor Evers is for it, you guys can't be for what you used to be for? We have about 66,000 people on supervision in this community. The research and data is clear. The riskiest time of individuals of reoffending when they're out of prison is the first couple of months. The longer they serve, the less risk they pose, yet we still impose long, decades-long community supervision sentences in the state. We keep watching people and watching people and watching people until we can trip them up, revoke them, and send them back to prison. States around this country, red, blue, and purple, have followed this chart. The reason why I wrote this is because I'm right, because it's happening. This isn't fake. States are doing it. So I'm waiting for Republicans to join me to put their name on paper, to take a vote, to speak up in this committee, to pass a budget or pass a bill outside of the budget, to begin to reform the criminal justice system in Wisconsin, safely reduce our prison population, and reinvest these dollars where they need it to actually reduce crime and treat root causes of crime. Thank you.